everybody. As has already been printed in the schedule, this is a talk in English. It is the third of our annual lectures on costume design and silent cinema, and there will be Q&A afterwards, just as there was yesterday. But I'm going to pass the microphone over to Deborah Nadoolman Landis, whose idea for this series, this is her baby, and we're delighted to be the location for the nursery for it, shall we say.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you to Jim Muto for making time for this field. I'm going to apologize. I don't usually read, but I'm really much more jet lagged than usual. And in situations like this, I tend to forget my own name. So I'm going to read. These Copley Center UCLA talks explore the pivotal role of costume design in silent cinema, highlighting its profound influence on the narrative and character development from the earliest films through the 1910s and 1920s. Silent film era costume design and designers played crucial roles in shaping both the visual identity of iconic films and the future role of costume design in the cinema. While the costumes of individual stars enhanced the aesthetic appeal of these films, they also contributed to the construction of celebrity personas that resonated with global audiences and brought them into the theater. Costume is the character. Our lectures mine studio, museum, and university archives and contemporary reviews to discover how costume design facilitated the storytelling process in a medium reliant on visual cues. This research includes the collaborative efforts between directors, costume designers, and actors, emphasizing how costumes were integral to conveying emotion and themes in the absence of spoken dialogue. We highlight the gender dynamics at play, noting how female designers and the contributions of women in the costume departments were overshadowed by their male counterparts, by their creative peers, and undervalued by the industry. And that certainly continues today. Silent film costuming is an understudied subject in our canon. By analyzing specific early films, our studies underscore the creative innovations in fabric, color, and design that define this era. Because of the lack of on-screen costume design credits, authorship must be scrubbed from memoirs, from trade magazines, newspapers, and personal archives. These pioneers of silent era costuming who contributed to the success of their films and helped establish both the field and the movie business has never adequately been acknowledged. Ultimately, our research asserts that costume design is and wasn't merely ornamental, but a vital element in the storytelling arsenal of silent cinema, influencing the development of visual culture in Hollywood, in global cinema, and setting the stage for future cinematic practices. With that, I would like to acknowledge my longtime assistant, Copley Center Head of Research, Natasha Rubin, who's with us tonight. She deserves it. And she's attending Jim Muto for the first time after hearing me talk about it for so many years. And now, please welcome my colleague, Priska Morrissey, Professor of Cinema Studies at the University of Rennes.
Okay, it's okay for the sound. Hello everybody. I would like to begin by extending my sincerest gratitude to Deborah Nadoolman Landis and her assistant Natasha Rubin for this invitation, which I am deeply honored to receive. Furthermore, gratitude is extended to the Giornate del Cinema Muto, and particularly to Jay Wiesberg and Max Mestroni for their gracious welcome. And I would be remiss if I did not also express my gratitude to you all for being here. I must acknowledge that it is a considerable privilege to be addressing this esteemed audience at the GIOVEDИ. So the objective of this conference is to analyze the manner in which costumes are organized and conceptualized in French cinema prior to the First World War. It is my intention to demonstrate the significance of the theatrical model, both in terms of its organizational structure and the personalities involved on both the theatrical and cinematographic fronts. Furthermore, this endeavor aims to shed light on the distinctive features of cinema, particularly how these attributes were perceived by contemporaries and the adaptations made to align with the unique demands and opportunity presented by the camera and film. So my research was based on a combination of films, periodicals, paper archives, photographs held in particular at the Cinémathèque Française, the Pathé Foundation, the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, and the French National Archives. In addition, I had access to a few costumes. It should be noted that there is a paucity of material of this type, specifically concerning pre-1914 French cinema. However, there are a few examples, notably at the Cinémathèque Française. We will commence with this remarkable document from 1906, reproduced in Pour Vous in 1929. Well, there are no similar documents in the Pathé Foundation archives. Should any such document be discovered by you in other archives, I would be grateful to be informed. Thank you. The document is so unusual that initially questioned whether it truly dated from 1906. It would appear to be the case, and Jean-Claude Seguin, the only individual maybe in the world with the requisite expertise to provide such a certification, has confirmed that it is indeed the signature of Henri Gallet. So for further details about Gallet, please refer to the Green website. As can be observed, this is a pre-printed document that allows for the insertion of a brief script and the pertinent details of the budget, including the film footage, the number of actors, the specifics of the set and costumes, and so forth. Well, there are numerous aspects of this document that warrant discussion. But however, for the purpose of this analysis, we will focus on costumes. The document specifies that 3 actors and only 1 costume that of a policeman will be needed. So, were the other 2 actors naked? Is this the reason why there is no trace of this film in Pathé Filmography? Obviously not. And we shall see the reasons for this discrepancy. The costs associated with the set design and costumes are considered. With regard to set design, the document provides details of the raw materials, woodwork, canvas, etc., and the working hours of the set designers. However, with respect to costume, there is no mention of an eventual costume designer or a tailor who would execute the design in volume, or even a dresser. Instead, there is simply a purchase category for costumes and accessories. Thus, for the sum of 3 francs, it is estimated that a police officer's costume could be purchased with no further expenditure. This observation reflects the lack of visibility of the trades and skills involved in making and shooting and dressing costumes. Alternatively, it may confirm that this skill is considered to be the responsibility of already paid employers, such as the director and the actors. To comprehend the discrepancies between the number of actors and the type of costume-related expenditure, it is essential to understand the organization of artist wardrobes during the Belle Époque. It should be noted that the rule, which would be extended to the cinematograph, is that all city clothes, modern clothes in French we say toilette de ville, were provided by the actors and actresses themselves. In contrast, the production of all costumes designed as special, including historical, fantastical, or profession-specific attire such as that worn by police officers, bakers, highwaymen, as well as costumes associated with specific activities such as hunting, was the responsibility of the theatre. So, the wardrobe of an actor can be a significant factor in the casting process. In his memoirs, the actor Fernand Rivers attests to the existence of a financial barrier, particularly in relation to supporting roles and extras in the film industry. He notes that the part often goes to the actor who is best dressed for the part. For example, the actor with the light summer suit needed for the next day's shoot will be chosen. It is crucial to acknowledge that this garment serves as the primary instrument of the actor's trade. The issue was identified and discussed at the beginning of the 20th century in France. In 1899, the attempted suicide of the Belleville theatre actress Miss Galozzo provoked a reaction from Parisian journalists and highlighted the importance of a well-stocked wardrobe for those working in the performing arts. A number of cases and lawsuits were successful in establishing this as a work tool. A significant turning point was reached in 1901 with the Miss Savine trial, which demonstrated that waterproof was in fact a theatrical garment for Miss Elliot, and that a white bathroom was associated with another theatrical production. The outcome of this trial was that street costumes used in plays were legally recognized as working tools and therefore inalienable. In practice, it is challenging to ascertain the precise boundaries that artists drew between their personal and professional wardrobes. Nevertheless, we do find testimonies from actors such as Félix Huguenet, who, for example, asserts that he never went to his regular tailor, as usual tailor, to order his costumes, even modern costumes. In an interview in Le Temps in 1903, he states so my regular tailor would dress me to wear. In any case, an important role often comes with additional financial obligations for the actors. And some roles are secured by having a varied and well-maintained wardrobe. In order to address the inherent inequities in this domain, actress Yvette Guibert established the association Le Vestiaire du Théâtre in 1907. The association was supported by donations and provided clothing and accessories to actors and actresses who were unable to afford them. By 1910, the association was still operational, having provided over 765 costumes to actors and actresses in Paris. So the association was headquartered in a modest Parisian apartment where donated costumes were received, disinfected, sent to the dry cleaner, repaired if necessary, and even adjusted to the size of the actor who will become the new owner. It is important to consider the logistical aspects of costume history, including the traceability of each piece, the cleaning process, the challenge of fitting a costume to a body, and the sometimes difficult boundaries between first execution and successive transformation. In this type of organization, the actor has a certain autonomy with regard to the appearance of his costume, a freedom similar to that which he enjoys at the same time with regard to makeup in the film industry. Of course, this raises questions about the director's instructions and the risk involved in such a system. For example, There are risks associated with costume changes, which can lead to continuity mistakes. In his memoir, Fernand Rivers, again, recalls the case of a stylish actor who changed his costume every day, causing editing errors of which he was unaware. In an article published in Scène Mondiale in 1942, Musidora recounted her debut at Gaumont under the direction of Louis Feuillade. She said that Feuillade was very unhappy because he had to redo a scene. During the lunch break, the director, so Feuillade and his operator, had looked at the previous day's rushes and noticed that René Navarre had not worn the same tie the day before. The work down that morning had to be redone. In the same 1942 article, Musidora recounts how, at the end of this first day's activities, Feuillade asked her to come the next day. So she asked what costume she should bring. And Feuillade told her to wear a full skirt, une jupe ample. This detail leads us to reflect on the requirements expressed by the director before the shoot. It is not possible to be certain of the exact instructions given to the artist. It would be useful to check whether any color instructions were given, but this is very difficult to determine with certainty. Méliès, in 1907, stated that he gave a brief instruction in the day before shooting, as did Feuillade. How far did these recommendations for modern clothes go? Well, in my opinion, many films bear witness to decisions that had to be thought through and that reflect an effort to direct. This week, for example, we saw Romeo Bozzetti's La course au potiron, the pumpkin race, famous comedy featuring a multitude of voluminous skirts, combined with an abundance of aprons, long walking smokes that make it difficult to move quickly, and a multitude of baskets and accessories. In this case, the costumes and accessories serve to reinforce the humorous discrepancy between dress and behavior and contribute to the staging of tangled bodies constrained by these masses of fabric that force them to gesticulate even more. It would be interesting to know who was behind the choice and perhaps the creation of the daring costumes worn by Joseph Andriot in the film Protea, directed by Victor Ajacet, who began his career as a theater costume designer. The film certainly puts the notion of costume and disguise into perspective, but it is also interesting on a more subtle level in the alternating use of black and white in Protea's outfits. In one shot, the graphic stripes symbolize the adventurer's duplicity. In another, Andriot plays deliciously with the alternation of black and white. In the scene where she unveils her famous tight-fitting black outfit, we first see her in a black coat with a white scarf under her innocent neck. Then the white scarf is removed, revealing a much darker top. And then, in the highlight of the show, when she opens her black coat, we see the inside of the coat. And the inner lining is made of a fluffy white fur, providing a visually appealing contrast to her tight black top, which accentuates her breast. It should be remembered, however, that this film dates from 1913, at a time when films were becoming longer and projects more ambitious. From the early 10s, there were texts criticizing the early years of the cinematograph, déjà, when films were made with, I quote, the scraps from theatrical costume shows. It should be noted, however, that from the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th, certain directors seem to have given some thought to the choice and design of costumes. Some even seem to have designed and made certain costumes specifically for the cinema. This seems to have been the case with Georges Méliès. First of all, it should be remembered that Méliès had a particular knowledge of design, of the possibilities of costume as a magician, and that he had access to the rich wardrobe of the Robert Houdin Theatre, as shown by the circulation of the magician cape from film to film. He claims to have had several costumes made especially for the cinema, some of them of his own design. We know that he commissioned the Pasco sisters to make costumes, and the company specialized in cardboard masks and volume costumes, probably the former Maison Hallé, to make the mask for the film A Trip to the Moon. Although it is difficult to determine the exact date of Méliès' drawings, as he continued this practice throughout his life, including at the early retirement home, the Cinémathèque Française has several sketches that appear to be costume sketches for design costume. This remark, you can see there, and you can see these remarkable sketches which gives precise details of bracelets and fabrics, as well this list of fabrics and scarves on the back of a drawing that could have been used to make scarves and maybe furniture and maybe various scarves, we don't know. Okay. A photograph illustrating his text of 1907 shows the Atelier des Costumes, the costume workshop, but Méliès specifies that it was for the repair and maintenance of the costume. In cinema, it would be wrong to assume that the production of costumes specifically for the cinema was common practice, of course, at least in the case of special costume. It is quite difficult to determine whether this was the case for modern clothes, but studios and directors had other options to meet their needs for their costumes. Costumes could be bought individually or in sets. Costumes can be bought from costume rental companies who sell costumes, but they can also be bought more cheaply at public sales and auctions. This happens when an artist changes careers, as a singer Denise did in 1900, when an actor dies, like the Wiedemann in 1893, or when a costume rental company goes bankrupt. Around 1904-05, Méliès bought some of the costumes for the Maison Le Père before the widow Corbobès bought the Maison Le Père. Georges Sadoul documented this transaction in his book, and the name Le Père appears on several costumes in the Méliès collection at the Cinémathèque Française. Another example, the bankruptcy of the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées in 1914 led to the sale of many costumes, accessories, wigs, shoes from the big houses of Landolph, Muet, Tissier, Barouche, Conquet, Galvin, Crête, Brand, etc. Note that the sale was advertised in Ciné Journal. When a film studio purchased costume, it did so in accordance with the standard practices of theatrical organizations. This entailed the acquisition of a relatively generic collection of costumes from which the studio could draw according to its specific requirements. In the early 10s, major French studios such as Pathé had extensive wardrobe, and some studios such as Eclair promoted their studio by boasting about the richness of their wardrobes, among other facilities. However, it seemed that renting was an essential and unavoidable way for directors to obtain costumes. This is evidenced by the administrative archives of the studio of the SCAGL, la Société Cinématographique des Auteurs et Gens de Lettres. In the early years of the 20th century, where could filmmakers wear costumes? In her memoirs, Alice Guy makes a brief reference to the Porte Saint-Martin. On the Boulevard Saint-Martin was the Maison Gilbert, a supplier of costumes to the opera and numerous theatres in Paris and the Provence. However, it is not certain that Alice Guy is referring to this establishment. As you can see, it was located, it was located in Northern Streets before, and the precise date of its relocation has not been ascertained for the moment. Conversely, the Port Saint-Martin district was home to a number of theaters, including le Théâtre de la Porte Saint-Martin, of course, Théâtre de la Renaissance, and the Ambigu, for example. It is worthy of note that theatre constituted a significant source of costumes for the cinema industry at the turn of the century. It would appear that there were instances when the renting process was not conducted in an appropriate manner. In an article published in 1905, it was revealed that theatre managers were not always fully aware of the nature of the loans or leases that they were being granted. As you can see, the articles indicate that for a period of time, theatre managers, so in Paris, had observed anomalous instances of leakage in their establishments. It was observed that costumes and sets would suddenly disappear, only to reappear in a noticeably deteriorated state. Following an investigation, the manager discovered that the equipment was being leased to contractors in the film industry without their knowledge. This resulted in a series of personnel changes in several major establishments. Notwithstanding this occurrence, theaters continue to provide costumes for use in film productions. The letter of Boudier, the administrative director of the SCAG studio, confirmed that the studio leased to at least 3 theaters between the years 1910 and 1914. The theaters in question were the Théâtre du Châtelet, the Théâtre de la Gaîté Lyrique, and the Théâtre Régal. By cross-referencing the titles of the films mentioned by Boudier, it is possible to ascertain the actual circulation of maybe certain costumes. This is exemplified by the case of the Théâtre Régal and the film Le Mémorial de Sainte-Hélène. Boudier's correspondence indicates that the costumes for this film, Le Mémorial, were sourced from the Théâtre Régal, the Maison Granier, rental company and costume maker, while the wigs were provided by Romain et Léon. The following is a list of companies that have a particular specialization in the field of theatrical costume. It is to these companies that the film studio can rent costumes or outsource the production of new elements. In the 20s, in the 30s, film credits still include such well-known companies as Muel, Granier, Souplet, of course, and Galvin for footwear. 2 observations can be made regarding this market. Firstly, the sector is comprised of a diverse range of individuals and companies, spanning from prestigious houses supplying the opera and major theaters to modest fripiers and businesses. Secondly, there is a notable degree of parity and feminization within this sector, as evidenced by the presence of prominent figures such as Marie Muel, Widow, Berthe Galvin, Delphine Marron, Veuve Menet, Widow Menet, Widow Millet, etc. Many. The costumes and organizational structures of these companies are designed with the specific context of theatre in mind, in order to be suitable for the cinema. Adaptation will need to be made. Costume rental companies receive the script from Boudier before the commencement of filming. This enables the costume rental company to know what is required and facilitates subsequent communication with the administrative manager. Boudier's correspondence also attests to the existence of costume tests and fittings, but it also demonstrates that they were not always adhered to in practice. It is challenging to ascertain the extent to which they were employed systematically, particularly in the case of supporting roles and extras. In any case, some letters attest to the occurrence of issues with the size of a specific wig or costume being insufficient, etc. Most notably, Boudier's correspondence illustrates a significant circulation of costumes and the necessity for accurate and precise traceability. It was not uncommon for multiple scripts to be filmed concurrently at SRGL. Boudier was tasked with the supervision of costume hiring across a multitude of locations. The film industry is a significant consumer of costumes. Given the number of extras potentially required for a single shoot and the fact that shoots are limited in time, it is evident that with such a vast number of costumes and accessories in circulation, the probability of errors, of loss and theft is significantly heightened. Between the years 1910 and 1917, Boudier consistently emphasized the necessity for costume rental companies to maintain comprehensive and accurate records for each basket dispatched. It was not uncommon for swords to be discovered in baskets to send to other costume rental companies. Additionally, there were instances where items were misplaced or retained by an actor. Boudier's correspondence also illustrates the necessity of negotiating rental terms in order to accommodate to specific temporal requirements of the cinematograph, which necessitate short-term rentals. In 1910, for instance, Boudier requested that Prévost, so the general administrator of the Théâtre du Châtelet, prepare two rental rates, one for a 3-day period and another for a 1-week period. He elaborated, I quote, "In some cases, we are able to return equipment within 48 hours, whereas we are liable for the cost for a period of 7 days. Okay, it's not just. It is important to note that the practice of hiring costumes from theater or costume rental companies was generally applied of course, for a limited duration, either for an evening or day, for fancy dress balls and cavalcade, or for a longer period, if the costumes were intended for a play with multiple performances. Theaters typically hire costumes for extended periods, requesting sliding scale rates. However, the demands of the cinema are distinct, with the timing of film shoots falling between these two models. Consequently, there is a need for adaptation in order to accommodate the specific temporal requirements of the cinematograph. Boudier rarely makes any reference to the color of the costumes in his correspondence. In instances where he does make mention of costume color, it is primarily for the purpose of identification rather than as a directive. However, it can be argued that an understanding of color is fundamental to appreciate the nuances of film costume. That is evident at each stage of the history of cinema: the choice of lighting, lens, raw film, post-production work, etc. The creation of the film costume as an image is contingent upon many decisions and techniques. In early cinema, this is particularly pertinent, given that film is produced in black and white, of course. Moreover, the negative film used was classified as either ordinary, essentially, as you can see, sensitive to blue and blue-violet, or orthochromatic, sensitive to blue and maybe a little in yellow and green. The degree of orthochromatization varies from film stock to film stock. As with the set, the choice of colors for the costumes must take into account the fact that they will appear differently on the film, that is extremely sensitive to blue, which appears white or clear on the positive, and insensitive to red, which appears almost black. The concept of grisaille, denoting a monochromatic visual style, characterized by black, white, and sepia tones, is indelibly associated with the way we imagine film sets, early film studio set design. What about the treatment of the costumes? In 1907, Méliès provided a detailed account of the effects of these emissions on the sets, but also props and costumes. He stated that, I quote, "Specially crafted objects painted in a uniform manner in various shades of grey, meticulously graded according to the nature of the object, will be utilized. As films are often colored by hand before projection, it is not feasible to apply the same coloring to real photographed objects. If such objects were made of bronze, mahogany, red, yellow, or green fabrics, they would appear as an intense black with no transparency as a result. Furthermore, it would be impossible to achieve the translucent tone necessary for projection. For this reason, the majority of costumes are created specifically to exhibit optimal photographic tones and are subsequently subjected to coloration." End of quotation. 4 years later, in Le Cinématographe Industriel, Jacques Ducom specified the choices that have had to be made. I quote, "It is of the utmost importance to exercise great care when selecting costumes for the cinematograph, particularly with regard to their colors. The film is still only slightly orthochromatic, we are in 1911, and not so much as to transform a bright red suit into a clear photographic reproduction. A suit of this color, so red, will consistently appear dark or almost dark black on the projection screen, while light yellows and greens will also be poorly reproduced. Conversely, dresses in blue, particularly very blue or dark violet, will appear white on projection. In order to achieve a harmonious composition, it is essential to select neutral colors that are never too white or nor too dark. These colors will ensure that the values are recognized as good. It is therefore recommended that costumes from used in ordinary theaters be selected. The use of pink jersey, which appear aesthetically pleasing in the limelight, will result in the production of black legs. This phenomenon is also observed with blonde and red wigs." End of quotation. And 1 year later, in 1912, in La Technique Cinématographique, Léopold Lobel considered that the costumes employed were sourced from theater costume companies and that costumes were not typically bespoke for the cinema. And like numerous other authors, he advised against the use of pure white, citing the potential for it to create a halo effect in the image. Well, it is necessary to make a number of points regarding this issue. Firstly, the comments made by technicians and directors must be considered. Ducom and Lobel do not address the issue of hand coloring in as a direct as manner. It is possible that you see this because they were working 4 or 5 years after Méliès. It is also noteworthy that there is a great emphasis on the rationale behind the choice and selection of costumes, rather than a genuine application of design, although some authors do indeed advocate this approach. This is associated with the fact that sets were constructed, as we have seen in 1906, were constructed and costumes were procured at that time. The costumes that were hired were designed for the stage or for fancy dress balls and were characterized by their vibrant colors and need to shine in the limelight. An examination of the Méliès costume collection reveals that the majority of the costumes were notably colorful. The collection of costumes, this collection, is challenging to comprehend due to its association with various Méliès activities, including, remember, the Robert Houdin Theatre and le Théâtre des Variétés. So this complexity arises from the fact that these costumes may have been used in activities that occurred before, during, and after the production of Méliès film, okay? So, nevertheless, you can see, nevertheless, it is possible, maybe hypothesis to identify maybe specific example of colored costumes used in the film, which provides the opportunity to observe again maybe the use of color in this context. Recently, Jean-Pierre Berthomé drew my attention to the contrast between the depiction of sets and costumes in Gaston Duménil's drawing. Well, the drawing is later in date, but appears to be faithful to reality. It is notable that the sets are depicted in grisaille, in black and white, while two actors are shown wearing red and green costumes. Nevertheless, there is evidence of at least one costume that, prior to the First World War, appears to maybe have been in perfect accordance with the recommendations of the technicians and practitioners of the era. The costume in question has been in the possession of the Cinémathèque Française for several decades. It was worn by Albert Lambert, a Comédie Française actor, in the famous 1908 film L'assassinat du Duc de Guise, directed by André Calmette and Charles Le Barger. The provenance of this costume is unknown, as far as concerned. While the film poster mentions sets by Bertin, fourniture by Leonardi, well, there is no reference to the costume designers themselves. However, it is possible, look at this, it is possible that the costume was created for the film. Regardless, it is notable that for its graphic use, of course, of black and white, as well as the absence of pure white. The slightly off-white and mostly yellow or beige coloring aligns with the recommendations of the time to avoid halo effects. Let us return to Méliès' 1907 text, which presents a clear and audacious proposition. Costumes should be conceived as reservoirs of color. This entailed selecting shades of white or colors such as grey, pale blue, and streamlining the costume to create surfaces to coloring. To exemplify this phenomenon, I like to invoke the figure of the devil or Mephistopheles in Méliès films. Why? Primarily, this example is representative of a historical tradition, as you can see with Granier and Le Père here, within visual culture, wherein the devil was traditionally depicted in red or occasionally green, as seen in fairies. And the color of the devil on stage in opera was a topic at this time of contention, especially if he was in black, which made the decision to simplify it all the more interesting. Secondly, an analysis of Méliès' treatment of the devil's costumes over a period of more than 10 years enabled to see, well, the clear evolution, well, to the costume in red running black, and you see the evolution of the costume in regarding the hand color. And we can see the treatment of the devil's color, the identification of the distinctive components that were ultimately preserved in order to enable identification of the devil or Mephisto, as well as the manner in which Méliès reinvents them on a regular basis. Thirdly, the last devil costume in the Diabolique Church window, the Vitrail Diabolique, a film created in 1911, features an intriguing black devil, in light of the numerous simplification and deliberate color choices that preceded it. This one stands out. Several hypotheses can be posited to explain this choice. One hypothesis is that the figure in question is only a devotee of Satan, who could indeed be depicted as black. But it seems reasonable to posit that Méliès was aware of the impassionate debate surrounding the black costume worn by Mephisto in the 1908 Parisian revival of Faust. And it is conceivable that he attended the June 1910 revival of La Damnation de Faust at the Opera, which was directed by Raoul Gainsbourg and featured a sumptuous and very dark Mephisto. It is, however, also possible that we are discussing a different topic, namely the history of color in cinema. Indeed, as this final photogram illustrates, the film was not painted with a brush in color, but rather tinted. To what extent does the choice of costume reflect the techniques used for coloring? Although these are usually costumes designed for the stage, their use in cinema has had to be adapted, particularly with regard to the representation of colors. In the early stage of film production, certain colors were eschewed, while other costumes were streamlined to serve as color reserves. It became evident that an analysis and a real understanding of film costumes, early film costumes, may encompass the contribution of collaborators unexpected, such as colorists. The costume is one of the first elements to be colored. The colorist, whose role is to add color to costume, also imbue them with a sense of vibrancy and autonomy. The color of a costume may tremble, may spill over, may even change from one shot to the next. The addition resembles the transparent veils that were so popular at the beginning of the 20th century, but may also serve to define and circumscribe elements of motifs. We saw a magnificent demonstration of that last night with La Sultane de l'Amour. I think it was a good idea to end with this film we saw last night, because its costume designer was Edouard Souclet, and his career perfectly illustrates the break caused by the First World War in the history of screen costume design in France. The son of an orchestra conductor, Souclet had been working as a costume designer for the theatre since at least in 1889, and had been welcoming to Paris Theatre in the Rue de Douai since at least 1893. You saw his name a few diapos behind, before. And had been welcoming, he's a costume designer who has made his mark in the history of theatre costume, not only through his work for numerous theatres, including Théâtre Réjal again, but also through his discourse, which, like others at the same time, promoted historical rigor in costumes. But he was also one of the first real costume designers in French cinema, especially at the beginning of the 20s. He played a role in the recognition of the figure of the costume designer, as you can see here in the publicity material, but just see, it's a wow. And helped to forge the image and role of the costume designer in France as a true collaborator with the director. Well, he is thus part of both a legacy of theatrical practice and a new history that began after the First World War. In the and this new history began in the 20s when this new collaborator was called upon, and costume design was thought of more in ambitious terms, and especially in terms of new things related with the question of rendering colors, but it's named now photogenic notions, and the new care of details that will be seen in close-up. So I will end with this promise of a new chapter of costume design in France. Thank you very much.
Priska, that was really terrific. We have time for questions, so does anybody... yes, okay. Yeah.
Well, thank you for this wonderful presentation. I was wondering, well, you probably know the story in America of the Keystone Cops. The suits, the New York police changed suits. So the old suits were sold at auction, and Max Sennett heard about it, bought all the suits, and then had the idea of doing the Keystone Cops because he had suits of cops. Now, the question is, do you know of examples where the other way around, some costumes were available and that led to the production of a film because they had the costumes at hand, or the creation of a character because the costumes pre-existed the film and the production?
I don't have an example, but maybe. But,
oh oui,
voilà.
Oui.
Cochon danseur, pas dis-nous en plus.
Well,
Cochon danseur.
no, but the dancing pig.
Oui. I want to know everything about the dancing
Yeah. The dancing pig was a musical act. So in this case, that's right. They are filming a musical act. So basically, that means the musical act preceded the film, and it was fancy because of the design of the costumes. But it was filming an act as it was done on stage and filming it in a film studio. Now the question is here, the creation. Like you would imagine, some people told me that the Charlie Chaplin suit, the legend that in 1914 you would just choose a suit in the wardrobe and come out with two big shoes, and but that was probably not true, because actually on stage at the Carnot Theatre there were people who were wearing that kind of suit already. So that's the influence from theatrical to movies. But
well, the musical served, of course, for films, and when they were famous star of musical, they came with their costumes, especially if it was singular of their identity in musical, like, I don't know, the Lloyd Fullers and Little Teach, even in the Méliès film, you have some of dancers who came from Théâtre du Châtelet, but maybe in the catalogue from London, and I think they came with their costumes. But I know exactly what you ask. It would be very interesting to get a list of the costumes in the wardrobes of Eclair or Pathé, but as far as I'm concerned, I didn't see that in the archives. But it would be very, very great. I don't have example. Maybe someone in the assistants have another example. I saw that there is a question.
So I just have something to add to that, and I see your hand. Costumes have been recycled. They're the easiest things to recycle. Clothing is recycled. So what you're asking really is the writer or director remember a costume and then invented a scene or a shtick for that costume to be in. That may have happened. We know, and you can track costumes throughout the history of cinema, as you have done, where you see it on stage and then you see it in the movies. But costumes have constantly been recycled, very much like songs are constantly recycled. We love that song, let's put it in the movie. Yes, what did you have to add?
Yes, if you can hear me.
Wait for the microphone, we'll push it to you.
Thank you, that was fascinating. You showed the photograph of Yvette Guibert. Is that Toulouse-Lautrec's Yvette Guibert? And if that's the case, is there a link between her and early costume provisions?
Well,
At the very beginning, the photograph of her,
yes.
after that.
Well,
It's her. Yes, of course.
Right.
Yes, yes,
That's
yes,
not her
yes.
on the picture, but
Yes.
it's the same.
Not on the photograph. No.
Right. So I'm wondering if you've thought about possible links between Toulouse-Lautrec's painting and costumes, and perhaps she got some of them from there, and so does that create a link between Toulouse-Lautrec and some of the early costumes used in film?
But, I don't know, but you know, this is a small world. I think the Parisian theaters, and so I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Hopefully, there was a link through the track. Possibly. Do you have other precise questions?
Yes, I have one since I have the mic already. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. With regard to Georges Méliès, since of course he was in charge, he could select any costume that he wanted. He had a predilection for playing the devil or the demons in the films. Who knows what kind of psychological reason there would be for that. But your talk reveals that there was also probably something more than just convenience for the costumes of the devil that he chose. And it's interesting in the series of images that you show that he progressed from the standard theatrical costume of the devil or Mephistopheles to something that was more unique. And the black devil toward the end of his career. So my question is, would you care to speculate if Méliès had any kind of personal involvement or interest or investment in the choice of the devil costumes that he liked to wear?
Well, I didn't work on other, major figures of the fairies, so maybe there are other things. The question of the device is as I said, it's quite interesting because there was a debate on what colors of the device. So it's interesting to see that in the first films, he chose, I think, the kind of, the kind of things you can find in Giornate of Le Père, so very black, rich, very rich red. And so it turns black, and you say, okay, it's not okay for me. So what it was astonishing for me, surprising when I see every film, it is a variation between the films. I was sure that now it was simplified and very clear. I thought it was almost the same devil, the same Mephisto. No. It was at every film. It was a new costume, and well, it's quite surprising. Surtout, above all, especially after 1904, because it was a period where Méliès said that he ordered a very rich costume of devil, and you have postcards, and we have the models, you have the costume sketch, and we have the model, and it's very rich costume. It's really pale, so I think maybe it was a light green, because this costume was, as far as I'm concerned, in the film I saw, colored in green, so maybe it was green in reality, because we have to think that Méliès thought about the Méliès films, of star film, of course, but he also thought also for the Théâtre Berlin. So he has to get a costume really rich, and no, after 1904, Well, it was quite surprising, the differences between the variations.
There was a question here, yeah, here, and then Stephen over there.
Just a small remark.
Oui.
Yeah.
Just a small remark. From one print to another, the colors were not consistent. So everyone who reconstructs a Méliès film from different prints knows that the colors used from one print to another can be totally different.
Okay.
So which raises a question.
No, you're right. You're right. Yes. Yes, and actually, I thought many years ago that it was only red, because the devil is red and everything in the press you say, well, devil is red, is red, is red. But in fact, in the kind of fairies, it may be green.
So I was thinking in the Russian Empire, which was very highly influenced by the French cinema, and the first companies were indeed Pathé and Gaumont, only everything happened about 10 years later. So what happened to the costumes there, as far as I remember, before the revolution, before 1917, is the only names of costume designers that ever appeared in the credits or in announcements were indeed people from the theater. And they had very similarly, like in France, costume agencies. And they were so actively used at a certain point, the main costume agency in Moscow, a company belonging to a certain Alexander Paldikin, became a production company. Because costumes played such an important role in films, they, instead of renting the others, why don't we produce films ourselves? So I wonder, I'm sure that Russia is not unique in this respect, and there's something similar in Europe as well.
Well, thank you for this reference. Well, I don't know such as a case in France, but regarding the question of credits, in cinema, at this time, no credits, or maybe one time I didn't see, maybe. But conversely, for the theater, the costumes were very, very credited. The renewal of costume for a Grand Review, for a new theatre piece, quasi always you have in the press the indication that the costumes were designed by, I don't know, Georges Barbier, Charles Mancini, and executed by, and beautifully executed, of course, graciously executed by Granier, Muel, etc. So you have an equally emphasis about the costume designer and the costume executors. But you don't see that in France or at that moment.
Stephen and then Lisa, the gentleman there, behind you. Yeah. We, if we.
Priska, I have only one criticism of your talk, which is that you are much too modest. Tu es beaucoup trop timide in not mentioning your previous work, which is a marvelous book on the history of French cameramen. To my mind, one of the best film books that's come out in recent years. It's called if I recall, Les Arts de la Manivelle.
Les As de la Manivelle.
Okay, and which could be translated as the aces of the camera crank.
Yes.
And it should be translated, I think, into English. Okay, that's my second point. My last point is about theatrical sources. I think you're absolutely right that this is really important for the study of costume in film, and I hope other people in other countries will take inspiration. I've just got one example from my own country, the UK. In 1913, if I recall, when Charles Braden came over to England on behalf of the Edison Company to make films, he hired costumes from local theatrical companies and wigs from Willie Clarkson, who was a famous perruquier, wig maker in England. So that's my suggestion to other people. Look, go to theatrical sources and maybe you and we will find more information.
I'm totally okay with you. I agree, totally.
Elisa.
Thank you. First, thank you very much. It was a wonderful presentation, very interesting, and we really learned something, so thank you very much. And, well, it's not really a question, it's a comment. Let's say it was something that's on the table that I think you can say much more about that. Well, my obsession is dancing silent film, so that's something that I always come back when listening to lectures, etc., as yours is probably costumes in silent film. So I just wanted to underline the influence also of dance costumes, because of course you said theatrical costumes were recycled or inspired other costumes in films, the same companies that were producing costumes for theater also landed costumes to in companies, but also the influence of costumes designed. I'm thinking about the dancer that you showed us, the sketch, Maria's sketch for the Danseuse du Ventre costume, and of course there was a huge influence of Orientalism and those costumes that Léon Bax especially designed for the ballet russe, and that on the one hand had a huge influence on ballet, but also on the contemporary fashion, and ultimately also in films. And on the other hand, also the kind of how did you say it in English? Abolition of the corset that changed the costumes on the in theater. That changed women fashion at that time had a huge impact on ballet costumes. So it was everything related, ballet and women fashion of the time and film costumes. And if you want to say something more about costumes that you have found related to dance, if you want, otherwise, thank you, it was wonderful anyway. If you have something to add about that.
Costume dance. But you have, I don't know how to say it, tights, and you have dance costumes, I think in the Melias collection, so if you are interested, voilà. And you talked about the balls aussi, you talk about the ballets. Well, just one thing, for the Russian ballets, it was made, designed by Bax, but the costumes were made by, as you can see, Marie Muel, and, just there, advertising, and there were very big Russian shows as the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées by Astruc, and so when there was this big auction, auction in 1914, advertised in Ciné-Journal, so maybe Bax and Muel costumes were bought by Film Studio, maybe. So because it was a real bankrupt of Gabriel Astruc, and if you are interested by this history, you have very rich, a rich collection of archive papers on Astruc at the National Archives. And you have letters from Muel and from Maud Levaux. Levaux, it was she was a feather worker, and after the success of Chantecler, she wanted to become a costumier. So she wrote to Gabriel Astruc and says, okay, I have employed the very first order stresses and a costume designer to become a real costumier. So please give me work to do. But it was well. So I didn't answer to your question comment, but okay. Okay.
Brandon?
Hello. Thank you so much. I enjoyed this immensely, and these were actually thoughts going through my head as I walked in. I wonder if somebody knows this stuff, so thank you for filling a gap that I didn't even know existed. I'm curious, this whole kind of journey that you described here, is there a time at when, I know you have said that costume designers were often not credited, but is there a time at which the concept of a costume designer on a film kind of clicked into place where it was more commonplace as opposed to this ragtag, maybe the actors or maybe the rentals? When did that become more common? And the part two then is, was there a time, I know in the States there was a time when some of the art directors, so to speak, that were overseeing the sets had some influence or power over the costumes as well, even if they didn't design them. Was that something that happened in France as well?
Well, the role of the costume designer is well known in the theater sector, and they are quite, maybe not all the same people, but so I think they know very well what could be a costume designer. And you have interviews before 1900 and even in 1911. And for the cinema, I think it was for that it was, I think, a good idea to end with a souffle, because souffle gave many interviews on what is the role of a costume designer in the theater. Maybe 1911, when he relocated and he made many publicity about his work, and around 22, 23. Not in 1919 for the Sultan de l'Amour, but I don't know, 3-4 years after, in 1991. And it's interesting because it's quite the same chronology for the cameraman, the reconnaissance of the French cameraman and the credited cameraman. And the first text in 1999, etc. And after, during the first years of the 20s, it began. So, well, but I didn't work enough about the 20s regarding the question of costume to make a more precise answer to you. Thank you.
We have one more question and then we'll hold it back.
Bonjour, madame. My name is Stanley. I'm a high school student. First, I would like to thank you for the talk. I find it very interesting how you would break down like a very complex concept so that us high school students can also understand it. So I'm actually an actor, and sometimes during films I had to wear like suits or like really tight stuff, so it's really hard for me to walk around. And this might be a bit of a silly of an example, like Batman, he wore like very tight stuff, and I don't know how he's walking around. So I was just wondering, from a perspective of a costume designer, how do you consider an actor's mobility and like what he's trying to do during a film when we're trying to design a costume? Because when you're wearing a lot, it might be really hard to do things like action films and lots of moving around, and I was wondering how you put that into consideration. Thank you.
Actually, maybe you remember that I quote Felix Huguenet. He said that he doesn't want his regular tailor for the costume for the scene. And in the same interview, he says that he doesn't want his regular tailor also because he doesn't want to be tight in his costume regarding the question of acting. So it is exactly the question. And well, it was in, I don't remember the date, but it's exactly the question. Exactly. But well, it will be another lecture. But actually, I'm analyzing also the films regarding the question of movement of fabrics, and the question. Well, I talked a little about the lining of protea, but it's a question. The question of the revelation with the lining. It's a really, really interesting question in cinema, and you can see Méliès films with this question in mind.